Carrie side is fired up, and we're heading back there now to the MetLife's Global Technology Hub, where we're going to hear a conversation on the support necessary to properly empower women in the workforce along all stages of their careers, particularly mid-level and senior leadership. It's going to be a great, robust conversation supporting women at every stage of their careers. Our panel is led by Jamie Thomas, General Manager, Systems Development, Delivery, and Enterprise Security, IBM. Jamie, tossing it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Katie, and good morning, Cary, North Carolina. It's great to be here with all of you to experience this STEM journey. I am Jamie Thomas. I am a general manager at IBM. My team at IBM actually designs our advanced processors and all of our system hardware offerings, including the IBM mainframes, power systems, and all the components that go into our quantum computing systems. So I'm very proud of the innovation that the team brings to the market, but I'm also very proud to be here as a woman in STEM. It's been my lifelong passion to encourage more women to enter this field, which I think offers opportunity for us as individuals and allows us to do amazing things for our communities and the organizations we serve. I am joined by 3 other ladies who are equally as passionate about this topic as I am, and I think you'll appreciate that as we go through the dialogue here in the next few minutes. So I'd like to introduce them, but then they're going to also say a little bit more about themselves as we go through the program here. Sunny Myers, who is the Senior DEI Executive at Palo Alto Networks. And then we have Allie Burns, who is the CEO of Village Capital. And we have, Sheri Schwab, who is Vice Provost of Diversity and Equity at NC State University.
That's right, yes.
So welcome, ladies. And I would like to start with Sunny to say a little bit more about why are you here in Cary, North Carolina on this panel today? What brings you here?
Thanks, Jamie. So I'll tell a little bit about myself to get started. So I am a community builder. I'm a justice warrior. I strongly believe that women belong in this space. And anybody who knows me, and I have a couple friends and colleagues and family in the audience, knows that I'm a little spicy, and I use my voice, and I encourage and empower other women like myself, and particularly women of color, to use their voice. I also sit on the board for Triangle Women in STEM, advocating and empowering women. And I'm a mama bear to some awesome kiddos. I'm also a foster mama. I am a partner to an amazing husband on my squeeze. I do want to share my pronouns are she, her, because that matters. I'm a rugby coach. I know people are like, what? Prior to my current role, and then doing this work at Amazon and Cree, now called Wolf Speed, I'm an electrical engineer. I spent 15 years, EEs in the house, in heavy tech, and I'm still in tech and STEM, and so I've been there, done that. I don't know if we got the medals, but I'm proud of that, and I think we need to see more women in this space, and so I continue to show up. I continue to offer what I have and bring it to the table, and then I continue to flip the tables that don't need to be set up.
All right, thank you, Sunny. Sunny has no spare time. I've already concluded that. Allie, what brings you here? All the way from Washington, D.C., right. So thank you.
DC, which felt like a much longer journey than it should have been last night, but really excited to be here. Thank you for having me. So I'm Allie. I run an organization called Village Capital, and we provide investment readiness training and capital to entrepreneurs who are solving major social, economic, and environmental challenges. And that is part of the reason that I'm here. We work with entrepreneurs, particularly those who have been historically left behind by the early stage investment ecosystem. You all probably know the data if you're sitting in this room because you are paying attention to what's happening, but Less than 2% of venture capital goes to female-founded companies, something less than around 10% maybe to mixed gender-founded companies. And then, of course, if we look at companies founded by women of color, the numbers are absolutely abysmal. I think it's still in the double digits, the number of women of color who have, Black women in particular, who have raised more than $1 million in venture capital. And that's just unacceptable. And we're missing out on huge, huge opportunities. So I don't necessarily consider myself a woman in STEM because my background is in communications, but I've been in the sort of early stage investment space for about 15 years now, and I consider myself a champion of women in STEM, and particularly those who see entrepreneurship as the path to create the solutions that they want to see in the world. So excited to talk more about that today.
Thanks for being here, Allie. It's certainly the financial help and the mentoring is really fundamentally important to all the women here. Sheri, you had a shorter commute to get to the panel.
It's 12 minutes, just right up the road. So yeah. I'm Sheri Schwab. I use she/her pronouns. I think that's important for us to lift up as well. I'm very excited to be here. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer at NC State University, just down the road. You might have heard a few Wolfpack shout-outs along the way, yesterday and today. And of course, what we do at NC State, we're thinking about that pipeline, people who are coming into STEM disciplines and then wanting to pursue careers, out in the tech industry, in the life sciences, and in many other areas. And so I'm not a woman in STEM myself either. I'm an administrator in many ways. So what we're really thinking about and what my passion is really seeing all those women. We have our most recent classes, entering classes at NC State have been predominantly women, over 50%. And yet, where is that pipeline issue? And then the people that we're hiring, we're doing a great job attracting female identified talent, but they fall off along the pipeline. So that's where my areas of interest really, and my passion coming here today, being part of this, is for us to come together and think about those systems that are in place. How do we dismantle those as good engineers would, and how do we make sure that we address those inequities so that we can keep and have people persist in their careers along the way?
All right, well, thank you, Sheri, and that's a great lead-in because recently at an NC State event, I met a young lady who told me that she had learned a little bit about quantum computing in high school, and therefore she was entering in the STEM arena at NC State. So it was a great story. And that's what I want to dive into next. So we need to be obviously role models for the next generation. What is your vision, starting with Sunny, for this next generation of women, and what do you see in their future?
Yeah, I'm so glad we're started with this one because I think this is what inspires me. I don't know if we're allowed to cuss on stage, but y'all are badasses. You really are. I mean, I meet with you, I hear you, I see you, and y'all are some of the brightest minds. And I feel like, my generation started the fire, but y'all are gonna burn it all down. And you hold folks and companies and communities accountable. You do it with poise and intellect, and it's just so inspirational. I want to be like you when I grow up. And I think that we need to stop looking at the pipeline. We need to stop looking at early in career women as not capable. They're more than capable, and they're going to run circles around us, and we're going to sit there and I'm going to cheer them on the whole way and champion them. But we really they just really inspire me, and I'm just honestly proud of them. So
Thank you. Allie, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I share all of the sentiments about the importance of accountability and holding the way that this next generation is holding us as leaders accountable to really, really move the needle, because I shared the data. Robin shared some data about how much we've moved the needle, which really is not much. In the data that I shared on the 2% number, that number literally hasn't budged. But I am optimistic because I see women who are starting companies or who are serving as entrepreneurs as well, who are pushing the boundaries and saying, we need to use business as a tool to solve these big social challenges. The data that was released by MetLife really shows that that's a role that women can play, and really pushing us to change the way we think about the role of business in the world, and I'm really excited about that. I will say I do also have a little bit of frustration that the numbers haven't moved, so I think that's on us as at the sort of senior, mid and senior level to really push for that to move. So.
Sherry.
Yeah, many of the same sentiments when thinking about this question is that the generation now is so entrepreneurial. It's really remarkable, and they don't have this sense of, I'm going to pick one career and I'm just going to go there that whole way. Even the students we're seeing at NC State, they might be in this major, but they started a little business over here and they're doing these things. And it's so remarkable to see that sort of framing of breadth and depth of what career choices they may have. And I think how do we ensure that people can move across their careers? And I think, Allie, you're right about the part about those of us in the mid-career and later career, modeling that way, cheering people on to pull people forward if we're in that position now. So that's what I think of. There's just so many great opportunities. Again, the frustration, the hope, frustration with where we are, the hope and optimism, and then just a pure fire. Speaking of fire, I think about what gets me up every day. And even though the work is really hard and it's daunting and it's okay, I just keep working at it. But really just this fire to do something, to make that change. And we talked a lot about that yesterday. What actions will we take? Not just talking about it, what are we going to do about it? So.
Great comments, ladies. And I think what you all encapsulated is that join STEM and you can change the world.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the message that we need to get out. That's what I always tell young ladies. You can change the world in this field. I have the pleasure of being the Board of Trustees chair for Wake Tech Community College. One of my trustee members here on the front row reminded me of that. And that's what we do in the community college, to give everyone, including all the women, this view that this could be a huge opportunity.
That's right.
There's a great opportunity for you in your future. That brings me to the next question, which is a tough question, but it's about the barriers to achieving these goals, to getting to where we are here on the stage, but most importantly, the best practices that we can use to overcome those barriers as well. And Sunny, I know this is a passionate topic for you. Sunny's passionate about every topic.
Really, yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah, so I think we just talked a lot about the pipeline. It's less than 30% of students, women, in STEM make it from their sophomore to junior year. If we look at data, this is why I love Robin. We talk about data and being an EE, I like data. And data is important in my work as well. And when we look at, for every 100 men promoted or in leadership, there's only 87 women. And then when we look at women of color, it's only 82. We have a broken rung and we have to fix it. And women are leaving the workforce, they're leaving leadership, they're leaving STEM. We fix it by creating flexible spaces. We fix it by extending the ladder back down. You show up and you sponsor women. When you think you have too many mentees, you add another one. You do the work, and it's exhausting. I can't tell you. You gotta have to fill your coffee cup up, but it's time to grind in. And I think this is where we look at organizations to hold folks accountable, especially in leadership, financially accountable. Your goals and milestones, and if you're getting that bonus or not, needs to be tied. If you're bringing more diversity to the table, if you're retaining that diversity, if you're shepherding them to leadership, it's not just getting them in the door, it's how they've gone up the ladder. And we're seeing that dropout, and unless we tie this financially, it's never going to change, because what gets measured gets done, and we have to do this financially.
I see it. Great perspective. Allie.
I'll try to tie some work that we've done to try to understand what's happening in the early stage investment space and why are we not seeing that 2% or 10% grow, or when we look at other data and try to extrapolate it. So we did a basically 2-year-long research project to try to understand what was happening in the early stage investment space, particularly with accelerators, because we are an accelerator ourselves. And we saw actually that accelerators were creating more of a gap for women who were raising equity capital than if they had not gone through an accelerator. So everybody thinks an accelerator program could be a great equalizer. You can, if you're starting a company, you go through, you get lots of introductions to investors, so most likely you're going to raise a lot more money, right? Like that's the thesis. That was not happening for women. We had data from accelerators all over the world, and that was not happening for women. So we wanted to understand why. And basically, after we worked with an academic partner, after we sort of broke down all the data, the only conclusion that the researchers could come to is that bias played a role. So one, we have to admit that bias is a factor. There are lots of other factors. There's systemic structures that we need to break down. We need to think about more flexible workplaces, et cetera. But in the early stage investment space, we saw like, yeah, investors are biased. Like that, just full stop. Not because they're trying to be, not intentionally, but it's a natural thing. And particularly when you have a group of investors who look one way, they're not necessarily going to be thinking about their pattern recognition in a way that acknowledges women in particular. So what we found was basically investors, if they change their evaluation processes to actually say, like, what are we evaluating companies on? How are we scoring companies? And this is kind of, seems like, don't they already do this? But surprisingly they don't. Have a framework for making investment decisions that they apply to every decision that they're making or every evaluation they're making. That improves the outcomes for women entrepreneurs because there's a clear rubric on which a company is being evaluated. So when I think about how to extrapolate this to larger workplaces, et cetera, like in the performance review process, how can we change the structures and the ways in which women are being which everybody is being evaluated? How do we really rethink, like, this is a structure that was largely created by men in largely male workforces. What do we need to do to change that? How do we break it down into more clear structures that are more agnostic? And I'm not a researcher myself. I rely on the academic researchers, but I do believe there's some learnings that we can extrapolate to really thinking about how to change the system.
But you made a great point. Sorry, Sheri, let me.
That's good.
But I want to say that not all bias is unconscious. Like,
Yep.
It exists. There's isms that exist, and I think that we don't talk about that enough. These systems were built on white supremacy. These systems were built on systems of repression and colonialism, and we can go in depth there. And I think we have to name that in order to move forward and recognize where harm was done. How do we repair that? And then how do we move forward to progress? I think you're spot on in the processes, though, right? People processes are systems of repression, right? And we look at the broken rung to even leadership, right? Or the broken rung in academia, and then broken rung in early in career. We're seeing these major dropouts, right? We have to look at our people processes. Are they equitable? Not equal. We don't really care if they're equal. We care if they're equitable. And I think we have to go into our HR systems, right? Our pay equity. Let's talk about pay equity. I'm really passionate about pay equity because we look at pay equity, but do we look at intersections? Do we look at our LGBTQI plus community? Do we look at our women of color? Do we look at why Black women are paid 67 cents on the dollar compared to white men? Do we look at why Latino women are paid the lowest? Do we look at why Native women are paid the lowest as well? Like, why are we doing that? And we have to be able to uncover some of that ugly, and then understand why, and then rebuild these vast systems of oppression and make them equitable.
And I think, if I can just jump right
Sorry,
in there. No, I mean, it was part of the things I was thinking about as well, and I think it's sometimes hard, I was in thinking about this question too, is like, there's a little anecdote about a fish swimming in its fishbowl, and someone outside of it says, like, how's the water? And the fish is like, what? Because the fish doesn't understand it's in water and temperatures can be variable. So sometimes you have to reveal what these are through sort of experiential ways, because we can talk the numbers. The data is really important. I think quantitative data is important to help make arguments, and that's what, a lot of times where people start. But talking about this lived experience that people have and sharing up the qualitative data, like, I get sometimes a little frustrated in trying to push forward certain work because people will say, where's the data? Or we should do a survey about that. And those are great and important parts, but we know this. We've lived it. And we don't, to do another survey and not take action, I think, is actually unethical. And if we continue to just study it and put the data up, again, important, not saying anything against that, but we know these things. And so how do we start shifting in those ways? I think that experiential part about even just taking apart the hiring process like you were doing in the venture capital space. I think there's an anecdote or a story of some research about why weren't there more women in symphonies? And so they looked at the process. And so how people would get on symphonies is they would walk on stage, sit down, play their instrument for a jury. So they could see, people were choosing fewer females and people of color. It's like, oh, well, we'll put up a screen so that they can't see the person. And then the person would walk out onto the stage and still no change in the numbers of representation. It was the shoes. Women wore high heels. And so when they walked on stage, that made a different sound than flat shoes. And that was enough to still keep the persistence of this not having enough representation. So you really, that's where I'm thinking about these processes and how you have to reveal it. You have to take it apart to reveal it. And that might go beyond the data too, or using quantitative data and qualitative data and lived experiences. And that puts a lot of people in the marginalized identities to have to share that story and have to share that. And that's very vulnerable. This is what happened. This is how I experienced this. And then we put that into, and you share that hoping for change, expecting change, but not yet trying to find the paths to make that difference, and so we're doing this even here, like sharing our stories, hoping for change. How will that change? And that's why that action part is so important.
So great perspectives. It starts with the data, understanding how we apply that data to more inherent measurements that we really track throughout the process, and using that really to eliminate bias. I would also share a perspective that in my experiences, once you're at the table, I find that women are perhaps underconfident of their skills. And I've been in so many meetings where someone speaks up like they have a PhD in chip design, and I realize, well, actually they don't have this PhD in chip design, or they actually just got there 3 months ago, but suddenly they're the expert in a very complex topic, and I'm like, I actually know more than they do about that topic, but I realize I'm being too quiet. And so I think that one of the other observations is once you get there, you have to develop your confidence and understand perhaps why you don't have that same confidence. And all the studies will typically show whether it's because men are engaged more in combat sports like football or whatever it may be, a lacrosse, or, I grew up playing tennis. It wasn't exactly that combat oriented. But you have to understand how you can develop this confidence. It's a really important factor, I think, particularly as you progress in your career. But we're going to move on to the next thing, and that is about inspiration. So when you think, Sunny, about, and I know you have these examples, about the people that inspired you, how do you characterize that person?
I don't think it's a person. I think it's people. I have a board of directors, Sunny Myers Incorporated, and they are my champions. I recommend everybody has board of directors. And I look at them that I have my token white man. I need to go to him to say, I'm about to land something and I need you to give me feedback and how it's going to be received in space where it's going to be predominantly dominant populations. Can you give me that? And he'll be like, you said this and this is what I heard and this is how it made me feel. And while that's important, if you want to get to this goal, this is how the path that you need to get there. And he tells me sometimes what I don't want to hear that's challenging, but that's also productive. And it's got to get me to my goal. And it's also sometimes extra labor. And so it annoys the crap out of me, but it works. I also have my strong mentor that I can look up and see myself, and I want to be her when I grow up one day. It's Hilda Penix-Ragland, and she is the chairwoman for the Board of Trustees for NCANT, and I am honored and humbled that I get to call her my person. Y'all should all be jealous, but she's mine. And she will text me back in a minute. I see myself in her. It's a woman of color at the top. She has a strong engineering background. She is giving. She is passionate. She is kind. She is strong. She uses her voice at those tables and flips them, and that's so important. And then I have my family. I have my friends. They put up with my crazy sauce ideas. They support me. You know, my partner, my husband takes my kids. You know, when I'm working late hours, he doesn't budge. He picks them up, makes dinner. We have reverse roles in our house. He just kind of sucks it up, buttercup. I also think having, you know, folks in your board of directors. I have women in this room who tell me what I don't want to hear, and I think that's important for folks to be honest with you. And then last and not least, I want to say that I'm really inspired, and I think it's over the last 5 years shift, I want to say, by more of my Native women in this space. I am learning from them. I am growing from them. I am more tied to my ancestral roots and my tribal communities than I have ever been. And I think that's going to take me the next lifetime. And I think that's where being grounded in my community, knowing who I am, knowing that I have been brought here by songs and prayers of my ancestors and generations, knowing that I have the spirits of my grandmother and my grandfather looking down on me is so important to me. And I think that's what really inspires me.
Great. Allie?
First, I would also echo the personal board of directors recommendation. Could not recommend that enough. It's so important to have your people that you know are in your corner, but will also tell you the hard stuff and are not afraid to. I also wanted to touch briefly on the confidence point because I was reminded of the story that is famous in the senior women in the Obama administration made a pact with each other to reinforce something that another woman might have said, particularly if someone else tried to take credit for the idea. Not that that ever happens, but to say, hey, that's what she said 10 minutes ago. And I just think that's so important, the advocacy for each other. And I don't think that needs to necessarily only be amongst women, but having that recognition that happens. Women's voices at the table, even when they do speak up, sometimes are not heard. And so acknowledging that, recognizing that. On the inspiration side, you're probably not going to be surprised, having heard me this morning, that I'm drawing inspiration right now from entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurs that we support and that we have supported. There's a woman, Emily Morris, who's based out of Atlanta, started a company called Emergy. It's a micro hydropower plant, hydropower device that can go in man-made waterways, so in canals, et cetera. And she has been scrapping it out for, I think she participated in our program in 2015. She's been scrapping it out since 2015, sort of bit by bit, which is what a lot of women entrepreneurs have to do, and now has raised a significant Series A, has landed a significant government contract, and she's killing it. So she's the type of woman that I'm drawing inspiration from right now, and I have tons and tons and tons of more stories like that. So,
I love that.
But I'll stop there.
Sheri?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It's like, gosh, how do you narrow it down? Which is great to have so many folks who do bring that passion or that inspiration for us. The person I was thinking of today, her name is Dr. Sylvia Blankenship, and she is a professor at NC State. She's retired now, but she had the #1 highest earning patent at NC State for many years. And I was like, but she was just this, you wouldn't know it. She didn't lead with that, right? She wasn't saying like, did you know I have the highest patent? She never, in fact, most people didn't know that about her. She was a post-harvest physiologist in horticulture, and she created something that helped fruits and vegetables stay fresh longer, which is really important in countries where there's distribution issues. So you think about that, and she was inspired, to find a solution, for one of these big social issues, or think about food distribution, how important that is. And so she's great about that. But she's also a great administrator at NC State, and flip those tables sometimes. And she'd just say, "Now wait a minute," like da 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 da, and she'd name it. So, and she was just inducted into the Inventors Hall of Fame. So Thomas Edison and folks like that. So for her, for what she did. So she just is a great person. I still stay in touch with her today, but she just, I think, was in that era of being one, like we talked to some about yesterday, being one of only in a room, and what she had to do there and how she did it and kept going. And I think likewise the younger generation too. You're talking about a board of directors and how important it is to have a person, younger than you too, to help inspire and think through.
So you've all touched upon, I think, a key point, which is the diversity of this board of directors, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And how do you leverage that to your advantage? I think personally, I've had some really great women mentors. Mm-hmm. I would say, given the reality of the information technology world, my most influential mentors have been men.
Right.
And proud to say one of them is the CEO of IBM. I don't get to talk to him very often at this point, given his role that he took on a few years ago, sadly. But now I'd like to shift to another topic, which is how do we attract more women to STEM? Whether that's earlier in their high school years, or even transitioning into STEM from perhaps another career. Start with you, Sunny.
I might actually pass it to Sheri because I feel like you're going to be a good one on this.
Oh, okay, wow, great.
Excited with me a lot.
Sorry, I wasn't ready for that, actually. I was like, oh gosh, what is Sunny going to say? That's what I was thinking about. Right? I know, I'm like, oh. And I was sitting there thinking, I wish I had my notebook. I hope someone's getting this down, all the great things. Well, I think, in my personal reflection about this is, I think we have to have the role models and show folks, just like we're doing now, women, girls, to come into STEM and talk about it. And that's what's been great, like the excitement about it. It's not just like you're going to be at a computer all day just typing things in. You're solving problems, you're working with others, you're creative about it. And I think that's sort of the characteristics of the work that often gets maybe not thought about because you're having to learn to do some really technically difficult things, but through that you will be able to contribute in these ways. And I think that's inspirational for folks. The other part that I would wonder about, and we're thinking about, of course, in the higher ed space, but other places too, is micro-credentialing. So, maybe you didn't know you wanted to go into a STEM career when you were, enrolling in school or what have you, but then a little bit later. So how do we find pathways on or in to STEM that maybe come at a later point in life where it can really add those parts? So I think those are some ways we think about how people can get into STEM perhaps at a different point in their career, or maybe they have a great mentor, so like, I think you could really do something with this. Now that's not maybe go back and get an EE degree, that's a big endeavor, but are there ways we can think of getting people into it that maybe didn't plan from their junior high, career fair to plan this out? So I think those are some important things we need to figure out as well.
Great perspective. We're going backwards, so we're going to go to Allie.
I was also wondering what Sunny was going to say. So, I think to add to Sheri's comments, I think we need to, you guys are going to be tired of me harping on this, but I think we need to fund and scale more companies that are having a big impact on the major socioeconomic issues of our time, and also to support initiatives within companies where STEM skills are driving that change. The data that came out from MetLife showed that's what women in STEM want to feel like they are having an impact. And we need these solutions. The solutions to climate change, to mitigating climate change, to innovating and adapting to climate, to creating more economic justice in this world, those are going to require technology-driven approaches. And so I think that is a huge way that we can attract women in STEM. It doesn't have to only be through startup companies either. It can be through existing companies that already have the workforce and the skill set and the tools and the capital to be able to solve these big problems. And I think it'll crowd more women in. I think the data clearly showed us that. So.
Well, what is Sunny going to say?
I'm learning so much about the entrepreneurial space from you. I just appreciate that perspective. We have to expose girls to STEM, and we have to do a better job at it. I think we talk about this pipeline. We also, I'm not immune to the fact that companies want ROIs. They want a return on their investment for what they're putting in. And I think that we need to hold companies accountable to saying you need to invest in companies, communities, programs, right, that are going to expose like girls to STEM early on. You made the comment about being in tennis. Well, I'm a rugby player, so I was always showing up really well and being loud and proud on the field. But it's that same exposure early on. Robin had shared about the Rubik's Cube. That's a big one. Gaming's a huge industry right now to get girls involved in STEM. There's so many simple ways in STEM. Like, y'all are also women in STEM. I just want to tell you that. Even though I'm the EE on here, you are women in STEM and own it, and don't ever say that you're not. But it really is important that we have to show these girls that they can see it and achieve it, as Robin also said that somebody quoted yesterday. But they just have to be exposed to it. If they don't know it exists early on when they're playing with toys, play with Barbies, right? Who might be, I love some Barbies still, right? But also, the STEM kits, right? How are we financially and intentionally going, especially to marginalized communities, and exposing more of these students, particularly girls, to STEM, and we can't look. This is the long game, y'all. Like, it took 50 years, right, as Robin had said, to get here. We can't wait 50 more, and we gotta stop saying like this is the right thing to do. Right. We all know it. Right. It doesn't mean that we have to have an ROI. I mean, yeah, you'll maybe probably hopefully you get your ROI in I want to say 10 years, that would be lovely, right? But another 50 years or another 20 years. But you have to be accountable for not just caring about your company and caring about, a global issue, a community issue, a worldly issue. Because if we don't get these brilliant minds in here, we won't be a catalyst for change. We won't have the inventions that we need. We won't have, worry about global, climate change. We won't solve these problems. We have to get them in early on.
Yeah, I think you all stated this, but it's also very much about articulating the vision of the kind of problems that you can solve. Right. I would submit that if we hadn't had such profound technology, we would not have gotten the COVID-19 vaccine as quickly as we did. And it was really a testimony to the technology that we had here in the United States, to both in biomedical and information technology, frankly, to get that done. Mm-hmm. And I think there's in the Hidden Figures movie is just encapsulates a little bit of the history we've been talking about, where the women in that movie obviously helped get us to the moon. Mm-hmm. And that's just the pinnacle, maybe the pinnacle of what we did 50 years ago, and see how much more we can do as we go forward. We have limited time, so it's going to be a lightning rod on your last comment you want to leave Cary, North Carolina, New York, and all the audience with. Okay. Sheri.
The last comment. I'm going to follow Sunny on all her social media platforms. But I think it really is what I think about is it's our phrase at NC State, think and do the extraordinary. How do we call people into this space and say, you can be part of it, we want you to be part of it, and you can do this. So I think it's that exposure, and I think it's the support along the way. And I think if we keep lifting up this part about we don't really have time, how do we motivate people to accelerate this, this social issue that is really impacting our ability to come up with some of these grand challenge, the solutions for those. So I think finding that thing that will really drive people to take this and really accelerate it.
Allie?
Mine would be a call to action, which is no matter where you are in your career, very early or very late, find at least one new person that is from a marginalized community that you advocate for.
Love that. Yeah, I'm going to +1 on the call to action. So allies, advocates, bystanders. If you can't write a white doc about what you're doing to elevate women in this space, if you can't write a white doc of what you're doing to elevate women of color in this space, you're not doing anything. You really need to start showing up. I think to my women in this space, I see you. I value you. I'm an emotional person, so I'm trying to try not to cry. But you belong here. And we need you here. One of my favorite quotes is, some women fuel the fire, or fear the fire, and some women simply become it. You are the fire, and we just really need you here. And when you forget who you are, just take a deep breath and remember who the hell you are.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap the panel with that last comment. Sunny, Allie, and Sheri, thank you so much for your insightful sharing today.
Great job.
Thank you,
And thank-
Cary, North Carolina. Are you ready to take on the challenge?
Yes.
Yes.
And a thank you to Jamie as well. Got to give her some credit. Well done on that panel. Cary is fired up. New York is fired up. And so is our virtual audience.